if you like just transplanted this split that he had into, I don't know, like the last 6 splits or something, he probably would have been first team like 3 or 4 of them. You know what I mean? Like it was a pretty exceptional split from Jojo, I think, to kind of knock him down.
Hello and welcome to The Dive Season 7, Episode 17.
It's been 17 episodes.
God damn. Season 7.
Wow, time flies when you're having fun.
Surely does, Mark. Surely does. There was a comment on the last dive about how much we were making fun of.
Yeah, I saw that.
The random things that you were saying.
They definitely hate Mark.
That's true.
They were like,
for the record,
he was like, no one can convince me otherwise.
Yeah, for the record, he was right.
I was like, let's not try and convince him then.
Yeah, no point. Yep.
They've seen through the ruse.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff to talk about this episode.
Actually, a lot of news. Yeah.
There's a lot of news. There's the All-Pro voting. There's the teams who died. There's the teams still in playoffs.
Teams who lived. Teams who are soon to die.
Couple not long for the world probably, but hey, at least
kinds of teams.
No one dies this week. If there's anything to look forward to, all the teams are still going to be in playoffs at the end of this week.
Okay.
That's
the
Optimus Mark, my new look. Yeah.
If there's anything to look forward to, it's not that there's going to be good games or like fun matchups. It's going to be that no teams will be eliminated.
If you're a Dignitas fan, they'll still play again next week after the. Yeah.
All right. Perfect.
They don't play this week. They play next week.
Right off the rip, this is kind of random, but a bunch of players dealing with like injuries or accidents and whatnot all at the same time. Doublelift tweeted out that he was in the hospital, and I know I saw Lena replying that like he had internal bleeding, which to me just sounds incredibly scary.
For weeks.
Yeah, for a while at least.
So that was why he was feeling sick for the Immortals game?
Yeah. So 2 weeks ago, where he said he felt terrible. Or was it 1 week ago?
I don't know the whole timeline. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not really sure on the timeline.
But it's been a while, and that is really scary.
It is really scary. I mean, dealing with health issues, like sometimes you just feel bad, and you're kind of just like, well, it'll pass, and it doesn't, and then all of a sudden it turns out it's like a serious thing, right? So that's definitely scary for him. It's good that he caught it and is getting it treated, and presumably is going to be A-okay. But definitely scary stuff for him. And at the same time, Jojo and Revenge were in a car accident. They got T-boned, I guess, at an intersection yesterday.
LA drivers, baby.
Which I also just saw. If you remember history teacher, Chad.
I saw his tweet too.
He works on Wild Rift. He also got hit by a car while he was also in a car.
Yeah. Jojo got hit by a car. It just sounds way weirder than in a car accident. So go with that one as the headline.
Yeah. But I mean, they said no injuries there, so thankfully they're okay. Yeah. There's also like the ongoing Faker saga where he's been out for a while, and T1 looked horrible without him, which is now everyone's just like, well, Faker was the puppeteer. They're all brainless monkeys. Like they all were terrible. Like everyone looks bad because Faker isn't there. Why is Carrie bad all of a sudden when Faker's not there? That has nothing to do with him, right? So. I feel bad for Poby, swapping in, and he's obviously getting a lot of blame.
You're not Faker!
Yeah, exactly. But it is one of those things that it's just, again, I think, reaffirming how much Faker brings to the team and how much Faker brings to the org. Because obviously he's been around for a long, long time. It's been quite a few years since I think people would say he's like best mid laner in the world. But he is consistently making international finals and regional finals, and he's like, obviously still playing at an incredibly high level. And I think this is showing to people, wow, this guy is still affecting so much more than just like his individual performance. And I think it's bringing kind of a greater appreciation to new fans of Faker.
Yeah, and it's not like, so T1 had other issues, beside this. It's just that when you rip off the Faker tape that is covering the giant hole, then it seems like everything came gushing out. And it is really sad too for this team, because this is the team that's gotten so close so many times, and you're like, all right, it's fine. They're still really good. They'll make it happen next time. And now you start to be like, well, maybe not. And maybe when is this the last next time?
Yeah,
that's actually really sad.
That's what it makes me think of. Is just like what happened. Like this is temporary right now. Hopefully he recovers, but like there's a dark day coming at some point in the future of LoL esports when Faker's not the like looming presence, final boss of everything. Even when he doesn't make it to Worlds, he's in the videos. It's like, I don't know. the GOAT's going to retire at some point.
Yeah, were you thinking about it from that
angle? I was thinking about this
T1
actual
up?
team. Because this squad of players, they keep on getting second, all finals choking, all this stuff, but they're so talented. They had so much promise.
That's what I was thinking. Because if there's no happy ending where it's like, we've seen Carrier crying, beside himself after losing finals, and all these, almost made it multiple times, in international events, international finals, whether it's world semis, world finals, MSI finals, etc. If they never get a win and the team breaks up, that would be sad. That's one of those things, because I think, like you said, everyone assumed, at least I'll speak for myself, I definitely assumed that they were going to stay together and eventually they were going to get over the hump and win one.
Yeah.
And then I thought maybe, hey, the floodgates could actually open, because this team, it felt like a bit of a mental block. Zayas in particular, I think he has been a lot worse in the high pressure games. But, they haven't had their kind of moment, and I always kind of assumed, that they would eventually win one, and then they could maybe just rip off a bunch in a row. But who knows? If Faker doesn't return this split, imagine if they are having like a good ending to the split. Maybe the team starts to break up, maybe they make other changes. That would be crazy.
I love sad movies, and so this would be a great ending. Not the Faker being injured part, but like the never get over the hump, and he fades to black and the text appears on screen.
Too bad, kid. There's not all happy endings.
Yeah. Yep. Basically.
Yep.
That would be. I love No Country for Old Men. That's my favorite movie. Sad ending.
That is a really good movie. That's a good
Right.
choice.
I'll shut up. Otherwise, this podcast will turn into a No Country for Old Men podcast. Stop me before I get started.
No Country for Old Carrier.
Yeah.
Oh my.
All right. Well, I for one hope they have a happy ending. I don't mind sad stuff, but I do like a happy ending. I will say that. I do like a happy ending.
I also like a happy ending. What about you, Mark?
No, I like sad endings because if you like the sad ending, you're never disappointed. But if you like happy endings, you're sad when you get a sad ending.
That's true.
I'm happy no matter what.
Do you like the sad endings because they're more rare? Like if it was so common that all movies would always have these sad endings.
No, just if it's done well, honestly. If you want my honest movie hat on, I think blockbuster Hollywood feel good stuff, I get it. But when someone does a sad movie with a good point, it's just rips your heart out. You're like, oh, this is why I feel things.
For me, I know. It's definitely a certain factor is the novelty, and it's like, oh man, it's so rare and edgy to have the main character actually lose, type of thing.
I think one thing for me that makes them enjoyable at times, I do like happy endings, but one thing that does is it can feel like, hey, that's actually a bit more real, right? It's like things don't always work out, right? Everything doesn't always work out, and there can be a lesson and an interest in that too. So. For me, that's kind of part of it.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it really depends on what it's doing. Because I think there's the sad ending where it's and then they don't get back together. The love story that doesn't end with we're so different. But that doesn't do it for me. But, I don't know. I'm down for some. 5 centimeters a second, baby.
As long as there's a point to the character's suffering, I'm down for it.
Yeah. I don't I don't like misery porn or whatever it's called, where you just
everything goes bad.
Everything goes
you don't.
Everything goes against the main character. Well, this is a difference. You like Farseer trilogy. I don't. I did not enjoy. I only read the first book of that, but I was like, I'm over this.
Yeah.
You're just gonna torture Fitz the whole time. Fitz.
I liked Farseer trilogy too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good. Don't get me wrong. It's a good series, but I was just like, ugh.
I mean, to me, we're getting really off topic. We should probably move on before this literally becomes.
What you get with the morning episode? Whatever comes in, boop boop.
Yeah, I mean, this is I could talk about fantasy books a lot.
I know.
I literally
read them every single day. We need to do an off-topic, off-season one where it's nothing league related, and we just bounce
because now I'm just like, let's respond. I know. It's just bubbling up. Okay, we're gonna move on. Riot has removed the feature to spectate high elo games to the leaderboard.
Oh my God. That's tragic.
So the tragic
Captain Flowers in shambles.
Yeah, sad ending for Captain Flowers. Neutral ending for everyone else because no one else used the tool.
I'm also pretty sad.
Yeah. When's the last time you used spectate through that?
It was a couple months ago.
Okay.
I remember being frustrated that there weren't very many eyeballs.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, was there a way to turn it off or something? Because I felt like I had people on my friends list like Pobelter or something that should be on there, and I find them on the thing and there's no eyeball.
Maybe there's a privacy setting where.
So yeah, I didn't know if there was it didn't always put them all up there, or if there was some kind of setting that you could turn off, or if maybe if you're on I don't know.
Serb or something maybe doesn't pop you up there.
I already wish that there was more, but Captain Flowers use it every single day. He's always spectating.
Yeah, he just like sits on League and spectates. Yeah. He's on there all the time. I know it's kind of a funny story, but like he was saying when they were talking about making changes to spectate in the client and stuff, they like talked to him about it because he was one of the only people who uses this thing. Like almost no one uses the tool, and he uses it a ridiculous amount. So I think he was in some like crazy percentile of like top 0.001% of people like use it like of actual use.
He's a challenger spectator.
He's a challenger spectator, definitely. So he's in there watching your games, even if you don't know it. So you better be good, or Captain Flowers will.
He actually did that to me one time, and then he was streaming my games, and I was like, oh.
You've been violated.
Yeah.
No
and I was not winning that game either.
As you should have DM'd, you've been like, Kobe, you better play well. You got a couple extra thousand eyeballs on you.
Down mid after arguing with his top laner.
Yeah. I knew because some people were tweeting at me. And I was like, what's going on here?
Whoops.
That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense in like the kind of modern landscape where you have high elo streamers, you have YouTube VODs, and it's like so easy to watch the games that you want to watch. If you're like, I want to look at this matchup, like it's easier actually through these other services.
I just also think part of the reason not that many people use it is because how would you know?
Yeah.
Nobody goes over. The rank tab is hard to get to now. You have to purposely navigate a couple of tabs to get to the ranked tab for solo duo,
like 40 ladders
and then
in there
you have to go to challenger and like know that there's this weird. It looks like an eyeball. It could be something else. I don't know.
Yep.
Assume it's an eyeball.
Deflating beach ball or something. I don't know. Anyways, you wouldn't know. So it's not like the old days where the original was front and center. Yeah. It's literally like a rotating thing on the default, client that would have top one or whatever, and people click on that.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit because front page screen space is valuable, and you want to put more important in air quotes things on there, and then you put it behind a couple more clicks to get through, and then every click is a step that someone's not going to take, and then next thing you know, no one's using it because it's been a new generation of players and they didn't know to look for it. And
I'd also say, even for myself, just the more that gets added into the client, as far as like there's like all these different splash pages for different things and whatever, it just becomes so much that I just stop paying attention to any of it. So I would feel like people are probably just clicking around in the client less in general. I think for most people, just open it up, click play, and that's about that, right? Because there's so many different pages now, and there's like, even like I've been playing TFT, and then there's like currently, there's like the regular TFT Battle Pass, the TFT Soul Fighter Battle Pass, the League of Legends Soul Fighter Battle Pass. There's like, and then there's 3 different pages even for those 3 different battle passes, and then there's the different event pages, and there's just like so many things.
I still click around on everything to see a little shiny dot, see if there's any free stuff.
Yeah. Anytime you, my God,
get a little free coin here, get a little free coin there.
If you put a little dot next to an icon, I'm like, I have to click it. What is that notification? I hate notifications. I have them all turned off my phone for that reason. I can't do it.
The worst is when they won't go away, though.
Yeah, you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
I will avoid tangenting again because I will if I don't shut up. So all pro voting discussion. Moving ahead, powering through, on and on. We had to submit our all-pro votes last night.
I'm going to say it right at the beginning. I forgot.
I was going to let you pass.
I know, but I was like, do I try and get through the whole thing and just play off like, oh, yeah, I totally did mine on time, guys. I voted for this.
So I'm just going to be honest. Last night.
I can't lie.
So it was due last night. We were talking about it before the episode. I'm like, so do we want to talk about our full votes? Kobe's like, our full votes?
I was going to let Kobe pass. I was not going to call him out in front of the class. To be like, this guy didn't do his homework. But...
I'm a really bad liar. So I was just like, you know what? Take me in.
We would have gotten to third team all pro, and Kobe would just have like a sweating meltdown. The meme with the.
What we should have done is start slipping in awards that weren't there.
Yeah.
It's like, hey Kobe, who'd you vote for the best effort award? And
I'm
you're like,
oh, is that new, Azael? Did they add that?
New award, yeah.
I mean, I saw that one for sure. I voted for insanity.
Yeah.
You put in a lot of effort. All right. Do you want to go by position or do you want to go by team in your estimation, like first team, second team, third team?
Oh, we could do whatever. What is more fun? But I think position by position kind of makes some sense.
It's easier to debate things.
You can talk within the role.
Yeah.
Do you just want to like drop them down there?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, for top lane, I think a lot of people will probably end up in pretty similar. I had Licorice first team, Summit second team, and Fudge third team.
Swap 2 and 3 for me, and I'm the same.
Okay, yeah. I mean, for me, like, I felt like top was the one I struggled with the most. I know I messaged you about this after. I think you said you didn't really have that many struggles. I felt like Licorice was clear. And then, honestly, I felt like there was arguments against and for a number of different players in there. I think Summit obviously had such an incredible laning phase. You talk to any top laner, they're going to tell you about how good he is in lane. But he also has a ridiculous amount of ISO deaths. This is this problem that has plagued him his whole career. Like, he dies so much in side lanes and stuff by himself. And it is a real problem, right? It actually costs them games. And that's something you have to detract from him. Then you look down at Fudge. I think Fudge had a pretty unremarkable season. I also think if you want to be a detractor from him, if you want to be a bit of a negative Nancy about it, it's like, well, you were on a really good team and you kind of just looked pretty decent, right? Which is like way easier to do, which then made me start thinking about, well, what about like Impact? What about Rich? Impact looked pretty good. He was pretty solid, and he was on a crap team, right? Like, that seems way harder to do than Fudge. So then I started kind of getting into those kind of debates with myself. I'm like, well, Rich had some really bad games, but Rich also had some really good ones where he kind of hard carried Dig, again, on a bad team.
Then I started to debate. I had Rich pretty high. If I had done my votes on time, I definitely would have. I would have put him either 2 or 3 for sure.
Yeah, I was debating
just because of the good ones. Because I know, like, you can always point to, oh yeah, the Alawi game that was 0-5 at like 10 minutes or
that
whatever
really
like
bad,
that.
yeah.
I'm like, okay, fine, but like, that was a super extremely bad game. But he had so many really good ones. Yeah. And Dignitas, without him, looked so bad. Yep. He completely revitalized this team. Everybody on the team has such good things to say about him. Every opponent has such good things to say about him. So that one I definitely was a little surprised. Did you say he was your third, or he wasn't on?
No, I didn't put him in my top 3. I mean, when I really dug into a lot of the individual games, the thing that I felt hard was that it's like, even though Fudge was not such a standout, he didn't really have a lot of bad games. He was very consistent, right? Like, so it's like, yeah, like Rich had the one that everyone points to is that Alawi game where he like picks Alawi and Constante and gets solo kill two times, I think, but he kept chain dying in the same way. But he had quite a few other games that were like negative gaming experiences.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the Alawi one stands out, but there were, like, he had the really hot streak to start, and then there were a number of games where either he couldn't get it done or was actually a problem. He had, I think, a second Quinn game. He had like the one Quinn game that he won. I think he had a second or third Quinn game, which was like really not inspiring, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I really like Rich, but for me, I do care about consistency. And I was thinking a lot about like how to frame the like recency bias topic that often comes up around voting. And on the one hand, every game counts the same. It's 18 games. How did you perform across 18 games? But also, there's like a narrative that does matter, which is like you're supposed to be improving across the split. And so like the way I phrase it in my head is like, just to make the logical argument is, if you had a player who had 9 great games and 9 terrible games, how you break those 9 and 9 up actually matters a lot. If you had 9 great ones at the start and then 9 terrible ones at the end, you're probably not giving that guy all pro because he fell off a cliff. But if you had 9 terrible ones to start, 9 great ones at the end, this guy,
wow, look at his improvement.
He got so good. If it's just 9 and 9 every game alternating, wow, this guy's really inconsistent, And it does matter how you do. And so for me, a lot of Rich's like stuff was really good at the start of the year, and then it felt like it dropped off and he couldn't keep carrying, and they ended up 7th versus when they were in the top half of the league. And is that the end all be all of why? No, because like you said, I think Fudge was actually very consistent the entire time.
Fudge was a bigger drop off to where he was than compared to the rest of the league.
That's where I think people are like, he was clear number 1 all pro last split, best top laner, and he's not now. And I'm like, that doesn't mean he played bad.
It doesn't mean he wasn't top 3.
Yeah.
I to the point of like, Rich was on a much worse team though.
That's where I struggled, is because how much do you credit to being on a good team and stuff.
Also, there's a argument that Fudge kept bringing up about the jungle always going bottom, but that's every top laner. Fudge was not the lowest jungle proximity top laner. There were 4 above him. Solo, Haunter, Someday, and Rich all had less jungle proximity than Fudge as well.
Yep.
In the early game.
Yeah, I mean, I was digging into all the jungle proximity. I was digging into opposing jungle proximity. I was looking at like a lot of the forward percentage stuff. I was going back and checking games. Like, so I spent a fair bit of time on it because like I was really trying to like, I don't know. I almost felt like I was trying to convince myself not to put Fudge on it because I was like, you know what? He did have a big drop off. I feel like some of these guys deserve it, but it's really hard because it's so hard to define what you would have done on a better team. And the reality is there's a reason why people on better teams end up getting all pro more often, because your performance is amplified by that of your teammates, right? And there are mistakes that are going to get papered over by your team's successes, and it's impossible to know what that would look like if you just like transplant someone onto another team, right? Like my expectation is that if Rich was on Cloud9, he would have looked really good, but it's hard to say.
Exactly.
For sure.
I think that's the thing that like you kind of have to accept what you were handed.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you could say, oh yeah, Rich on C9 with better teammates would be so much better, but maybe he just continues to like demand
Be
like
up and
play.
down.
Yeah, he plays too inconsistently for this team to achieve the same level that they can hit with Fudge and then play around Berserker more or something. You know, like
look at Summit, right? If Summit was on a bad team, he'd probably play the exact same way. He'd stop you in lane, and then he'd die in a side lane.
But then you'd be like, oh well, his team's not good, so he has to try harder. And like you don't know what's going to happen when they join these teams. So that's why for me it's like, yeah, I really, and to be clear too, there's some splits where you say someone's like top 6, and like that's kind of an insult because there's like actually only 3 good players. I actually think top lane pool is insane this split.
Yeah,
to be
I
fair,
agree.
like I don't think Rich is bad on the 7th place team. I think that the majority of top laners in this league right now are actually pretty good. But there's only 3 votes.
Yep. I mean, even I mean, I think Doko definitely had a drop off, but it was like I was talking about this where it was like in spring we were talking about, oh, maybe he's like, you know, top 4. Now he's probably like 8th, right? It's like the competition I think went up. I don't think it was just that he was playing worse. I think that competition top lanes are really high right now. You know, Impact, Someday, Revenge, you know, Rich, etc. These guys all had, I think, solid splits at the end of the day. But it still puts you, some of them, down to like 6th, 7th best top laner in the league, right? And I think that is just kind of the reality of the role right now. And I come to the same conclusion that you do, Mark, whereas it's like, at the end of the day, you have to vote based on what actually happened, not what could have happened if they were on a better team or on a worse team or whatever. So that's why I ended up with Fudge 3rd. But this was definitely the role where I had the most kind of like internal strife, I guess.
Yeah, this one's definitely the most packed. There's also always the difficulty of with top laners like Impact that do provide a lot that we don't get to see, you know, either in the games or in the stats because, you know, it's about shot calling in game. It's about review and getting the team game plan. He actually did an interview with Travis where he was talking about how he actually did way more micromanaging of teammates and that type of in-game shot calling stuff on his previous teams, on EG and Team Liquid even.
Maybe you should do some more on FlyQuest.
Then FlyQuest, and he was like, well, it's because a lot of the FlyQuest people already, they talk a lot, and there's a lot of big voices. And I was like, man, they should have given Impact the reins, and they should have told the other ones to quiet down. Maybe it would have looked different. But
I mean, that guy knows how to win.
Yeah, exactly. And there were a lot of the games. I mean, FlyQuest, because they had so many losses and so many bad games, they kind of blurred together. And so there's this phenomenon where the ones where Impact still played really well, and you're like, man, I feel so bad for Impact. He's playing so well, and FlyQuest suck, and they're just keeping him down. Like, those things rise to the top. And so I have so many memories of like, man, Impact, though, he's still playing so well. Look at that Poppy's making all these plays, and they just lose anyways.
Doesn't matter.
It's hard to separate those.
Yep, it is tough. On to jungle. You want to let it rip first, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Blaber, River, Pioshik were my top 3.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably most people's.
Jungle's got to be the most set, especially with Blaber and River.
Yeah, Blaber River, I think, is going to be everyone's 1-2. Maybe there will be some swaps.
Could switch.
Because I know I did hear some arguments, especially from people team side, that they were like, no, River should be above Blaber. A lot of people were really impressed by him. But I don't think that there wasn't really anyone. I was trying to think like who could actually make their way into the top 3 beyond this, because I think Pioshik actually had a pretty darn good split. But I was trying to think, okay, who am I snubbing? And I was looking through, and I didn't really feel like I was snubbing anyone.
Yeah, the 3rd place feels like
maybe
one
Boogie,
of opportunity.
But then it didn't really feel like.
I was gonna say Boogie. I think maybe contracts. I think he had some int games, but in the games that they won, he was very good. He had a lot of really good like Ivern games and Poppy games, and I think he's probably the one I feel like I snubbed the most.
Contracts also literally as a jungle, a late game win. Like he's the reason they win when he gets the pick. There were multiple games. It was like 2 in 1 week even where CLG or holy NRG are winning.
That's a hard one, man.
To get rid of.
Non-rational gaming.
Especially for me because I really was made the team.
Yeah.
They're losing and then it's like I remember the one clearly where I think it was FlyQuest actually. They split half their people on Elder and the rest of them, you know, were kind of around mid. And it's like Contracts runs out and he's on Poppy and boom, he gets a stun and they get a pick. And then even though they're so far behind, they should lose. Off of those picks, they run and they actually kill the Nexus. And then there was another one where he gets another pick and they actually win the whole game. I thought that's pretty rare for junglers for late game.
For sure. I mean, the hard thing for me with Energy is just they had a lot of really bad games, right?
Yeah.
Like really bad games.
And against bad teams.
Really bad teams, which to me was kind of like a double whammy, where it's like you didn't just have a bit of an off game against like Blaber, like you had horrible games against the worst teams in the league.
Yeah, I was Palafox came in to the analyst desk when we were doing the player of the match or player of the week interview, and he was like, "What do I have to do to get an all pro?" And like not confrontational, just being like, "Hey, seriously, like I want to get an all pro at some point. You know, like why do you think I'm not getting them?" kind of thing. And like we talked about some things, but the thing I wish I had said to them was like just consistency. Like NRG as a team, every split finishes top half and like does pretty good, but like it's always these late season like final week pushes, or they'll int when it really matters. It feels like, or again these losses to bad teams when like the people that edge them out often are not having these problems quite as much. So while a lot of them are very skilled and like I think top end could easily make all pro. Well, you talked about Dokla last split being borderline. Palafox was actually, I went back and looked. I think he was my second vote actually last split. Like I voted for him before, but to like get the whole community bought in, you have to avoid giving detractors ammo kind of.
Exactly. I was going to say a lot of people, the way that they're thinking about it, and I do this myself too. I mean, my process is basically like off the top of my head, who do I think it is? And then I start to go like to think and challenge my assumptions and verify. But a lot of the way that I'll do that is I'll be like, oh yeah, I think these guys, you know, and what will often stand out is like the best games. And then I'll start thinking about, okay, well, like, what about their bad games? Like, what are the things that are kind of like these things you can kind of like knock away at them and chip away at their case for? And I think that's what often works against Energy and some of these guys is that they have had a lot of bad games that you can start to chip away at their case a little bit more easily than some of the people that are, you know, a bit more consistent or on more consistent teams. But Jungle, I think, was definitely fairly competitive past top two, but I felt like top two was clear that Blaber and River, you know, are again at the top of the table. I know from talking to some people that were kind of like detractors of Blaber, the Blaber detractors were kind of saying, like he doesn't have to do much, you know, like his lanes are all just doing themselves. That's why he can just power farm. I am of the opinion that it's like he deserves the credit for being able to keep his farm really high while also having highest K plus A, you know, like kills and assists at 14. Like he is just so efficient. It's like if you can farm the whole game and everyone feels like you're farming the whole game, but you're also getting the most kills and ganks and plays that work, that just means you're really fucking good at jungling, right? Like that is the goal. That is what you want to be able to do.
Jungle is an efficiency-based role, so he's just accomplishing more total, right? Yeah. You're like, oh man, you get demerits for having too much farm. You're like, huh? I mean, yes, he does. He has had some really good teammates to play with. I think the solo laners this time around, this split, were a little bit weaker.
Yep.
Berserker, obviously very good, and Sven, I feel like, has started to have some really good rel games, so even played, engage supports pretty well too, which is important when you're playing like Kindred. You need to have engage support to be able to lead you and stuff like that. But Blaber and River are just the two different styles of jungling, where you can go super gank heavy and sacrifice more of your farm to play really hard for your lanes, and that's the way that you can come up with these more elaborate gank paths that everybody loves for River. And they're like, oh my God, he's so smart. I like how he got around this vision. He knew that ward was there, and so he jumped over this, or like he showed on this one purposely and then walks all the way around and has a sweeper here. And that part of jungling is really fun. That's what made me fall in love with it initially. But Blaber's part is equally, if not in some cases, even more important. And the efficiency, like you can't get away from efficiency as a jungler because every second of your time is needed somewhere. You have to be accomplishing something.
Yeah, I think it's cool to have the dichotomy. I think Blaber, 17.7 CSD at 14. Next closest is 1.
Yeah.
Everyone else is lower than that. It's like, yeah, he has the lowest team proximity to your point because he can power farm or whatever, but like no one feels like he's a low pressure jungler where you just don't see him on the map. He's not doing things. And I think, maybe part of the reason is because he's counter jungling the other guy, and like that guy feels annoyed, and like he's just doing smart things the whole time. I'm a huge Blaber stan, and like I think River had an incredible split and actually made it way closer than I thought he would. Yeah. But can't do it.
With jungle, you also have to look at mechanics. There's some junglers that can get by with less than
Sejuani duty,
less than impressive mechanics, let's say. But both of those guys have really, really good mechanics. Very, very quick reaction times too.
One of the things that also always stood out to me about Blaber is I remember talking to some different pros, and they were kind of just complaining that like Blaber's always there, man. It's like, well, why don't you do this? And he's like, well, because Blaber's gonna be there, right? And it's like
statistically no,
but like that to me just tells me that he's right place, right time a lot of the time, right? Because it feels like, oh, you know, well, I could have killed this guy, but Blaber's going to be there in the bush, so like I can't do it, right? And that I do think speaks to, you know, really intelligent, really efficient jungler, someone who can always be, you know, with their lanes when they need to be, but not overspending time. You know, when they're out of mana, they need their wave fixed, Blaber's going to be there. When they need a counter gank at a critical moment, when they're going to be vulnerable, Blaber's often going to be there. And I think that can be said about River as well.
Yeah, I think the final thing that I love about Blaber is just like the fact that he can make entire team identities around his playstyle and comps and stuff. Like the Kindred Melio Ashe comp is so clearly broken, yet no one else seems to have played it or even tried it. And I think it's most likely because so much of that comp hinges around the fact that you have a psychopath Kindred who's ahead of the game, and like the Melio stands behind him, puts cozy campfire, and goes, "Go Blaber!"
And he's
Blaber
just starting fights.
And then you're like, well, I guess I have to jump on this Kindred who's just running at my face, and then you engage on him, and he always gets his ult off. He never, not one, like I can see this comp looking so dumb where the Kindred's jumping forward like a maniac, gets chain CC'd and died. I don't think that ever happened when they ran this comp. It was insane.
I think part of that is that because Blaber has so many mains, champions, and stuff like that, he's not labeled as, oh my god, this Omega Kindred threat. Because we have other good Kindreds in the league. A world champion with the world champion skin.
But it gets chain banned.
You know, and other players that are like Kindred is their main champion, like Kenvi and stuff. So I think that Blaber is just because he's good at so many different junglers, he doesn't get that label, and so it gets through a lot to the point of like the whole pack of 3 getting through, especially with them even talking about it themselves as like, this is our best like guaranteed win comp. They said that on stage in the interview, and then they get it again in, you know, end of season
limit test games, for sure.
And you're like, we already tested this, we don't need to test it again. Is pretty funny. I will say, with all the like the Blaber love fest, we still remember the games where Cloud9 over chases, and a lot of times it's Blaber leading that over chase. He does get over aggressive at times. So like, this is not a player that is without faults.
Yep.
With, you know, even I also agree to, you know, I vote him or would have voted him #1, but he definitely has his faults as well.
Yeah, absolutely. On to mid lane, since you did last one, I can say this one, I had Jojo first. I don't think that is going to be
how dare you?
Much of a surprise. I think, again, top 2 is probably going to be pretty set in stone. I think Jojo Gori is going to be what almost everyone has. I had Palafox third. I think that may be a bit atypical. I think a lot of people probably are going to do M&S, but that was my top 3.
I had Insanity instead.
Okay.
I think
I considered him as well.
He fell off a little bit.
He did.
And I'm not thrilled about that. I would have loved to have been able to like slam him confidently in my top 3.
You're just gonna slide
him under the door.
Yeah.
I think the case I would make for Insanity before we jump back up to top 2, I feel the same way we kind of talked about junglers, where there's a clear top 2, and the third you can kind of make cases for and against each. The case for Insanity is he probably had more BS that he had to deal with in terms of being signed late as a sub, not having a guaranteed spot, getting subbed out, watching this guy come in, lose 3 games, come back in, start playing again. And it's really hard to know exactly what would have happened had he been the starter the whole time. But given the situation, he clearly helped this team get way more wins than anyone in the entire community predicted. No one had them above top 8.
And they did test it for 3 games with Ruby.
And you saw how it looked, which like kind of proves how important he is in some ways, which is like definitely involved with my voting. Is I'm like, I saw what this team was supposed to be, and we all thought that's what that team was. And with Insanity, they were a different team.
He brought so much proactivity to the team, I felt like.
Yeah, and a lot of it's not going to come through in stats. I try to make a compelling stats argument for him. It's not really there. It's all fine, but it's not like, oh, this guy's like insano. But when you watch the games, he's very proactive on the map, pushes, works with Boogie. Boogie has this more river style, like wanting to camp lanes and make ganks happen. And I think having like a mid-jungle 2v2 that actually functioned helped enable Boogie a lot more. You could see that Boogie was night and day when it was Ruby there versus Insanity.
Found his own style too, right? Like he was playing like a ton of different marksmen and whatnot. In mid between Kaisa and Tristan Graves and whatnot. So I felt like he was definitely, there was like a 3-pack of mid laners that could have been third to me, and it was like, you know,
Insanity, who's your starter,
Palafox or M&S.
Yeah,
I think those were the ones that were kind of in the debate for me. I went Palafox just because I felt like Palafox, similar to how I felt about Rich, but I felt like it was on a higher level. I felt like he was the reason for so many of their wins. He had so many pop-off games, especially these last couple weeks. Over the last 2-3 weeks, it was like, you know, 9-0-8 LeBlanc, 7-0-8 Tristana, 9-kill Yone, the 8-kill R game in a loss. Like he had so many games where I was going back, and it was like when I was casting the game or watching the games, either he does carry them to a victory, or I'm saying on the cast, well, it's up to Palafox now because he has all the gold, right? And I felt like he put his team in a position to win a lot of the times, and I think he had some strong performances even in losses. I don't think he was faultless by any means. The whole team kind of has to take some L's for losing all these bad teams. But I did think that he had so many standout performances that I thought really pushed them across the finish line to get a lot more wins than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's really close with M&S because M&S also had a lot of really, really good games. And it's hard because there are some games where it's like, oh my God, you know, Blaber just carried so hard, so I guess he doesn't get as much credit. Or Berserker carried so hard, so we're not really looking over here, and you don't get as much credit. If I'm submitting my votes right now, I think I go Palafox also though. He put in so much work, and he was sick for the beginning of the win streak as well. And he had to do a lot of work. Doka was way underperforming this split, I feel like, compared to previous splits from him. Their bottom lane change that they made for Energy
hit and miss,
never really panned out. So I just feel like this split, more than ever, there was so much pressure on Contracts and Palafox for that team, and they definitely deserve the credit.
Yeah, I'm very happy that they kind of rallied. I think they ended up finishing 5th. Yeah.
9-9.
9-9. Just... I don't know why the last week...
Golden Guardian Special, they delivered.
Yeah. Just the last week killed me where it's like, they beat C9. Oh my God, they're so good. And
it's actually crazy that they went 0-2 to Immortals.
Yeah, and then they lose to IMT.
That's crazy.
And then they lost to GG, and they lost 2 games to Immortals.
Come on, bro.
That is crazy.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't know. It's just painful.
It's bad.
Yeah. We skipped over the teams that didn't. Oh no, we're still doing that later. Sorry,
yeah, we're gonna do that later.
Yeah.
I mean, we should talk a little bit about the top too. Obviously, there are gonna be some Jojo detractors. He does have some games where he has silly deaths, but I will say I have seen very rarely a player improve upon their weaknesses so quickly as Jojo. I think Jojo also had an off split, whether that was because of lack of practice or just whatever. I don't know. But he didn't do well in spring at all. But even comparing JoJo last year to this year, he has fixed so many issues. It is crazy. Like, he had the Summit problem.
He was mid lane Summit last split.
Exactly, where he's just in a side lane and he's going to die. And this split, I feel like teams tried to prey on that so hard. They're sending 4 after JoJo. They're sending 3 after JoJo. They're constantly going to side lanes after him. They're attacking him in mid lane constantly. And he really did not fall prey to that anywhere close to as much as he did in the past. And that is a hard problem to solve because that is this like instinctual thing where you have to feel that you're doing the right thing. And I think the fact that he had that improvement, he maintained some incredible levels of dominance in mid lane 1v1s, which was pretty astounding. And he was managing to do that in a split where I think it could have been pretty easy for him to just kind of give up, because 4 out of 5 of the members of EG got wiped. They were going towards what was going to be basically a budget roster. They lost their superstar, jungler, the pairing that a lot of people kind of gave credit to JoJo for succeeding with And he's having to do shot calling. He's having to take on a lot more responsibilities in the game. And he also, I think, was having to make up for some mistakes of his teammates in game. One of the things that I felt like he did a lot was, there was games where he could be doing pretty well in the 1v1, but he's having to drop waves to actually go bot and help them because their wave state is messed up or because they are, in a difficult situation. And I felt like he was just such a complete player this split, and I think he was by far and away the reason for EG's success. And I think it's pretty damn impressive that, amidst a split that I think had a lot of turmoil for the org with all these changes, he had by far his best split ever. He made incredible improvements. He maintained a lot of his strengths, and he added a lot of new tools to his wheelhouse.
I mean, with all of the teams trying to attack mid so much versus them, he still pulled off a Blaber gap in CS for mid laners. He was massively ahead of anybody else for CS difference with how aggressively he played these lanes and how a lot of the times too he's the main win condition for the team. And then he also has these really big games where he plays Ahri and has to make all these picks for the team to be able to win.
And that was even with there was that one game like with the absolutely doomed level 1 where they did 5-man invade for red buffs, tried to smite it, didn't get it. I think he lost flash. I can't remember. And he also lost a bunch of HP. And then he went like negative 60 CS on Gori because they got super pounded that game. Yeah. So even with some like a game like that, his stats are still incredible as far as CSD.
CSD at 10 is 10.4. Next closest is 3.7.
And I think without that one like negative 60 game or whatever, it's even like way crazier. Plus, I know we were talking about this the other day when I was hanging out at the AD waiting to cast the tiebreaker games. Mark was looking it up, and I looked in this yesterday as well. He has the highest enemy JP like around him, so junglers spend the most time around him in mid lane compared to any other mid laner. Yeah. And he was about middle of the pack as far as assistance he actually got from his own junglers as far as jungle proximity. So it's like by all metrics, this guy's being attacked constantly. He was also the highest enemy support proximity of any mid laner in the league. Like teams' entire game plans is screw Jojo, stop Jojo. And they still couldn't do it.
And I want to point out, because the stats don't universally mean the same thing. When he has jungle proximity for Jojo, a lot of the times is him going to his jungler to help his jungler for an invade on like red buff or something like that, right? So it's it's definitely not just the one-way street.
No. And I think the fact that you saw they had the mid-season slump, they brought in Shaden, they 3-0 with Shaden too. It's like, I know Armeo, I feel bad for him getting subbed out, and that's a whole other conversation to have, but like at least shows that like Jojo can function regardless of like kind of what's going on around him when he's playing really well. And I think, not to get too far into the MVP conversation, but that's why he's in this MVP conversation, is because like I can't imagine EG with almost any other mid laner in the league. And even Gori, like I don't know how he would function on this particular team, just because it's clear language issues would arise and stuff like that. Whereas like the Golden Guardians, who is the second team All-Pro mid laner, I think is also insane. I think that he is one of the best playmakers in the league, working with River and Huhi to get stuff done. I just don't think you could actually translate anyone into JoJo's shoes and expect this team to be top 3 like they are. Yep. I'm definitely in there. I really like Gori for what it's worth. I think he's super good. And I
think they have the best mid jungle in the league.
Yeah, there was a this or that, I think, which was a really good one. Whoever cooked that one up. Compliments to the producer.
Compliments to the chef.
Yeah, that was a really good one, because I agree. The mid jungle and even mid jungle support for Golden Guardians. Yep. Best in the league.
Yep, and Golden Guardians is legit really good. And yeah, I do think that Gori had a really amazing split. And I think if you like just transplanted this split that he had into, I don't know, like the last 6 splits or something, he probably would have been first team like 3 or 4 of them. You know what I mean? Like it was a pretty exceptional split from Jojo, I think, to kind of knock him down. So I don't think it really takes away from the accomplishments that Gori did have, because I think he had an incredible season.
Yep, definitely agree. Moving on ahead to 80 carries, my top 3.
This Berserker number 1?
This one is like the top lane situation for me, where I think legitimately there's like 6 or 7 or 8 good 80 carries in the LCS.
Third?
Well, not for third necessarily, but just like it's a stacked pool. You know, we're talking about slot in whoever you want for third for the other ones. I think there's legitimate cases to be made for a lot of people in this one.
I think number 1 and 2 are pretty set.
Berserker, Stixxay.
Yep.
Third for me is Unforgiven.
Okay.
I think there's cases made for Yeon, even for Double Lift.
I went Yeon.
Any Wildturtles in the house?
Turtles.
Turtle, I think, is in there too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people you can put in the third one. I was really hard pressed between particularly Unforgiven and Yeon for me.
That was what I was debating as well.
They feel like opposites, where Unforgiven is pretty unremarkable in the lane phase.
Yeah.
Can sometimes get shut down through the lane phase and then kind of have no impact
Jojo
on the game.
Had to help him.
Yeah, stuff like that happens. But if he gets out of lane phase on track, pretty damn good in team fights. Yeon combined with CoreJJ, which is probably where my docking of Yeon comes from, is like, Yeon is really good in lane, but I think Core is leading that lane. But Yeon is really good in lane. He's actually still a good team
Core
fighter.
Was pretty butt for the last like a while now.
Well,
he was really good this split, but you know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's like, I don't think it's fully fair to say, he has Core, so of course.
No, Core is not the god walking amongst men that he was in ages past. But I just think that this split, it was they were combined a good bot lane. And
really good.
Yeon deserves the all pro votes that he's going to get. I just went the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was again. Yeah, this one was a bit tough for me too. But I put a lot of value in the fact that I thought Yeon, was kind of a really strong lane with Core. Of course, it's hard to separate the two, and it's hard to know exactly where to give credit because I do think Core had a really good split. I thought he had a big jump up in performance then over what he had individually for a while. Because I thought Core had a lot of mistakes in the past couple of years, couple splits or whatever. But Yeon, I think, was a really big performer. I do think he had some of his kind of like oopsie moments. Maybe he had more oopsie moments than like Unforgiven or whatever. But I thought he had some really high highs, and I thought overall he played super, super well. They were more lane dominant. His team fighting was good. Team Liquid clearly has some really big issues, but I didn't think it was necessarily about the individuals, more about how they actually work together as a team.
I side a little bit on the Unforgiven side simply because he has way fewer deaths. I really value that for AD carries. Probably just a frustration thing when you're just like, why is my AD carry there? Why are they dying in this moment? But they're so critical now, especially with the game revolving so much around team fights. You really need to have a good positioning AD carry for team fights, a low deaths for later on in the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will say the detractor from that is I did think he had some games where he didn't really die, but he didn't really get anything done.
Didn't put enough damage out.
Yeah.
That's always the line is like, you want someone, and I feel like actually Double Lift skirts this line usually really well, where he is really aggressive in getting extra damage out while not racking up too many deaths. Obviously, 100 Thieves had a really, really rough split, but he was definitely a bright spot on that team as far as always trying to squeeze out that extra damage. And AD carries, especially towards the mid and late game, can just create openings for your team to be able to get in way better positions for objectives and stuff like that, depending on chunks of damage that they can do. Not even just killing someone outright in a skirmish or a team fight, but just health differences.
And I think the person that exemplifies that best in the split right now is Berserker. Like, this guy is almost never dead at the start of fights, never picked off, just pumping out damage.
On Ashe, he's like just barely outranging this skill shot.
He's dueling people on Ashe. Yeah, you're like, what the hell? He just sold it out of Jace? What is going on here? But I saw some detractors of him, and it just shows how dangerous stats can be, because the detractors were mostly using this like percentage-based arguments around like
I saw a lot of tweets about his damage percent.
There was a Reddit thread that kind of blew up, which some people started to use as ammo if you're a Stixxay fan or maybe just like a C9 hater or whatever. And the caution that you have to have is like percentage stats can't really be used across team comparisons, because if you're playing with the highest DPM jungler and you have a really well balanced team where everyone's playing carries, like on C9, where M&S is a carry and Blaber's a carry, and you're playing Ashe and you're more helping the team out, like, you have to look at what's actually happening. And like, his kill share being low and his damage share being low is 100% a product of how the rest of the team functions. And this happens all the time. Happens game state matters. Like, if your DPM's lower, well, guess what? Cloud9 is one of the fastest teams in the league. Like, FBI gets juiced up numbers because he's in 40-minute bangers. All these things can combine to like why stats get changed the way that they do. And the compelling case against Berserker for why he shouldn't be first team All Pro is just not there. And then eyeball test is like, at the end of the day, one of the things you have to rely on. And he's insane.
The biggest thing people were doing this detractor was damage percent and DPM. He's like, I think second lowest in the league as far as DPM. He's just above Turtle. But yeah, I mean, Cloud9 has a 3-minute faster average game time than the league average. They're like the fastest team in the league. And as you said, so Blaber's #1 as far as DPM by quite a lot. He's like almost doubling the bottom of the league as far as DPM in jungle, so he's a very high damage percentage. Fudge is 4th in damage per minute for top lane, and if I recall, let me check up MNS. I can't remember if MNS is 3rd, right? So it's like you have guys that are all at or near the top of their roles, so like as far as the percentage-based stats, that really is going to kind of cut into that a lot. The damage per minute, you can maybe attack a little bit, but it's somewhat explained by the deep, like it did surprise me a bit, but it is somewhat explained by the average game time.
Yeah, and I think we're all on the team. Like, I don't think Ashe. I mean, Ashe has fine damage, but like you're hawkshotting, you're volleying from distance, you're ulting, whatever. I think it's pretty weak stuff. He also leads the league in CSD at 14. He's at 8. Next closest is at 3. So like his lane's insane. Great team fighter. Easy one for me.
And also the funniest thing to me about the Cloud9 stuff was I saw a lot of kind of like I don't know, cases made against Cloud9. Like I heard more anti-Blaber stuff than I have in a long time this split too. And I'm like, who is carrying this team then? If everyone thinks Fudge and MNS is bad and Berserker's not doing anything and Blaber's just full clearing, who's the carry
Support
here?
King Sven, duh, idiot.
It's the Yuumi.
I will say Stixxay made it close. I will say all the Golden Guardians players made the first teams all closer than I thought they would be.
And they got some first teams for me.
Yeah, I think Stixxay carried more games than anyone else in the AD carry position, or like won more games late with team fighting than anyone else.
Yeah, he was like the difference maker.
Yeah.
It was funny because right after coming back from MSI, I was like, oh no, he is the weakest. He was clearly the weakest link in the first couple of weeks for Golden Guardians. And then I would like open a Golden Guardians game and be like, oh yeah, you know, teams, like, they're looking pretty good still, bouncing back from the MSI hangover, but Stixxay's really got to step up. And then that game, he got like, who was an Aphelios late game double kill at the Elder Dragon, and they just like win the entire thing. And even his own team is like, I don't really know what happened, but Stixxay killed everyone, so then we just won. That was like Licorice's post-game interview was like, I wasn't really looking, I was in the pit, and then he killed everyone. So
copy and paste that for like
great.
3 or 4 other games too. I mean, there were a lot of games I felt like he should have won that he didn't, because like Golden Guardians did have a couple troll endings to games, you know. So I was like, man, he almost did it. He almost dethroned Berserker, but
it was good. Good try.
Berserker, at the end of the day, the biggest difference for me is that there's no one I would rather have on my team if the game's coming down to 5v5.
Yeah.
If the game's coming down to 5v5, there's just no one I'd rather, like, I would put more faith in consistently winning you the 5v5, and that's like the biggest difference maker in a meta that is defined by 5v5 team fights and playing around these objectives. It's often going to be defined by, you know, which AD is coming out on top. And it's like, even I'm reminded of the cast I did with Huhi, where Huhi was in on the cast with us.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, well, at some point in every game, Berserker is just going to find a moment and then he's going to get a triple kill and then Cloud9 will win. And then it was like 2 minutes later, you know, Zeri goes over the wall, gets a triple kill. He's like, there you go, you know.
He specifically, because I think it was like someone, either you or Flowers, posed him a question, should they go bot or should they go mid? And he was like, well, they shouldn't go bot because Berserker's going to get it there. And it was like instant payoff on that was quite hilarious because then he did.
Yep.
Yeah.
But speaking of Huhi, he was my first team All Pro. I think he, you know, was really, really incredible. Second team, I had Sven, and then I had Core third.
Yep.
So I guess we're aligned on that. Huhi, I think, for a long time, when people talk about Huhi, they always talk about the intangibles, what this guy does behind the scene, you know, what this guy brings to the team as a leader, what he brings as like an in-game coach, you know, all these different things. I think for the first time in a long time, maybe first time ever at support, people should be talking about what he is doing in-game himself too, because he was dominating. I feel like this split, he had way fewer kind of like oopsie moments that I think people still used to associate with him. They're like, oh, that's just who he has bad mechanics.
Oops, his set killed himself.
Yeah,
He's like, you got a great engage earlier. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. But like he had so few of those moments, I felt like, while maintaining a lot of the other strengths. I think that, you know, as far as a laning duo, they were really strong. As far as actually starting team fights, they were really strong. He's a flexible player. He's doing so much for this team. I was really impressed, you know, both by just not even knowing any of the outside stuff and just paying purely attention to how he's playing in game. I thought he was the best performing support.
And it's not like, oh, he has way less of these oopsie moments because he's not looking for these game-winning flanks. It's because he's not looking for these setups on objectives. He's still doing that, and they're working almost every time. So that's the most impressive part. It's like he's still such a big controlling part about how they actually want to accomplish the win in the game, and he's not backing down. And he has a really deep champion pool as well. As the other thing is that there's so many times where there'll be another interview on stage afterwards, and you're like, yeah, haven't played this in months, but looked good here. Yep. And he's able to play, any other number of engaged supports.
Yeah, I think the champ pool thing does help push him over the edge for me, over Sven a little bit. I think both of them had really good seasons. I think Sven's Melio was crazy. I know it's an OP champ. People are going to meme that, but I actually think he is legitimately incredible on the Enchanters. I was a little worried about some of his other games. I think his Braum is fine. His Rakan is like a little hit or miss for me. Don't love his Nautilus. But then his Rel was really good in the closing weeks. I think Sven actually had a couple of really good games on Rel. Even the one that they lost, I thought he had a really good Rel game, and he just couldn't save it. So he made it closer, but at the end of the day, I think Huhi just has. It's like hard to quantify, but like more game impact for all the reasons that you guys were just talking about. How much of like the leader on the team that he is really does seem like he contributes a ton in the draft with his flexibility. Shot calling, working with like the mid jungle trio that we kind of identified, whereas Sven is a lot more about staying in lane, it feels like, and part of that is Blaber's just doing his own thing. Like it's different team dynamics, but it does feel like Huhi does end up being more pivotal for his team success then.
Do you guys feel like support was the weakest role this split?
I think mid lane was the weakest role beyond the top two.
Was there anyone in third for support in contention? I don't think. Elo was good, but not like
Elo
crazy.
Fell off kind of a cliff, I think.
Yeah, the bot lane with him and Unforgiven in lane was not.
Chime was good.
Chime is actually probably legitimately the.
Chime was very good.
I think I considered Chime. I considered Elo briefly.
Yeah. I'd not ignore. No. Yeah, no. Chime's a really good call out. I think he was good. But I think the top
TSM's
three
bot lane is just good.
Yeah, TSM's bot lane is legit. Like TSM's pretty solid across the board. I think top is the one real inconsistency.
Yeah.
But just good, not great for most of their positions.
That's how I felt. Yeah.
CoreJJ monster in lane. It felt like still made a big playmaker, but the team's inconsistencies. It's like hard to separate Core from them, even though I don't think he's probably to blame as much as the rookies or Summit or even Pioshik a little bit. Like he's probably the least inconsistent, but they're still happening, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this.
I mean, it's the TL problems are weird because at the same time, it's like they haven't won in a long time, and they've had kind of similar like mid-gamey issues for a long time, and Core has been on every single one of those teams.
Yep.
Right. So at a certain point, kind of is his fault. Right? Like at a certain point, like he needs to be, a catalyst to fix it, or the coaching staff needs to be, changing the way that they're approaching the game to try to fix it. Like something is clearly wrong because they can't fix this problem. It's the same thing they've had forever. You're such a crazy good early game team. You're a scrim beast, and you just absolutely drop the ball in these mid and late game situations at a pretty like consistent, pace. So I do think, it's fair to detract from that. One of the things that I really felt like pushed Core into All Pro for me, though, this split was I just thought individually he was playing very well. He was having so many fewer mistakes. Over the last while, I felt like he was way more mistake prone. He was having way more issues individually, even just like mechanical issues, missed hooks, missed abilities, missed like Leona ultimates,
just being caught out of position for some reason.
Yep. So I do think he really stepped up in that regard, and I think their 2v2 was very, very good. TL clearly has mid-game, late-game issues. I find it hard to quantify exactly whose fault that is and to know exactly where to place blame. Maybe if there was another like really, really strong candidate on a team that didn't have those issues, then that could kind of bump them out. But I don't think there was that like shining star third candidate that could really push him out of All Pro for me. And I do think on an individual performance level, this is the highest I feel like Core has been for a little bit at least.
Yep, big agree.
Cool. Moving on, we have. Do you want to do MVP, Most Improved Player, or Rookie of the Year?
I don't care.
Okay.
None of them. How about that?
Okay.
What if we did none of them, save them for next week?
That'd be bold.
Let's wrap it up. All right. Thank you.
We still got to do the entire playoffs. The two teams who are dead and the two matchups that are coming. So, I'm down for whatever.
I think we should at least blow through them, even if we do it quickly, because it feels weird to separate it out. We don't have to talk about everyone. For me, my 3 MVP votes were Jojo first, Blaber second, and I did River third. And I felt a little bit weird about putting double jungle in there, but I'm going to be honest, I just thought those were like the 3 most standout players in the league this split. And I felt those 2 guys were like the catalyst for most of their team's wins.
I don't disagree, but I went Huhi for that reason. It's just I can't ever imagine a player who's not first team All Pro getting the MVP.
Yeah, I don't think River's gonna win, but I just felt like
I agree.
I thought he was the best player on their team.
When they win, it's a big team effort for them, but River is the standout, I think.
Yep.
But Blaber's better, and so for me, I put Huhi because I don't think the gap between. Funnily enough, I think like the gap between Blaber and River is bigger than the gap between River and Huhi for like importance for their team's success.
Yeah, I feel like Huhi is. I mean, because MVP, you can also start to take into account all of the like intangibles that everybody's always talking about with him. And I feel like it's massive for Golden Guardians. Every time you talk to any one of those players, they're like, Huhi just yells at us. He tells us what to do. Like, Huhi is taking such a deep hands-on approach this time. It's like he's built up more and more confidence over the years of his super long career. I just feel like Huhi is peaking right now. And I would definitely jump on that train of putting Huhi on the
Join me.
It is interesting, though, because the Golden Guardians guys, their campaign, the players, is that River should win MVP.
Yeah, because of the flashy plays and the ganks and
so it's interesting though. Like just even talking to some of the players, right? Like that's either even tweeting out.
Hey man, sometimes a party chooses the wrong candidate to throw their weight behind.
True.
Yeah, they're like, you know what? A support can't win MVP.
Get out of here, Bernie.
There's no way.
But at the end of the day, I think Huhi would be a great option too. But partly like I didn't think that River would win just because like, but I also realized that from a lot of my discussions with people that there is a camp of people that think that River is better than Blaber, and I felt like, hey, I was having this debate with myself and like who kind of really deserves it. So I felt like, hey, I'll give him the 1 point because I did feel that he was the biggest difference maker, in the games. I thought he was the best player on Golden Guardians. Huhi's definitely up there, but I thought Huhi had less competition than River had with Blaber, right? So I still felt like, okay, you're the 3rd best player in the league. I'm going to put you in, give you a point. But
yeah.
I think, I don't know, is it going to be controversial that Jojo wins? I don't feel like it should be. I feel like probably most people are going to vote him or Blaber. I don't feel like there's really much of a chance of a 3rd person winning, just based on just being real.
I think Berserker might get some votes from carryover from last split and stuff. I think a bunch of people might get votes. But no, I think the 2 obvious candidates are Jojo and Blaber. And I think Jojo saved his MVP candidacy with the 3-0 at the end
agree.
I think if they dropped any of those games.
Well, they were on a 4-game losing streak. If you end on like a 7-game losing streak or something.
I mean, even if but I think they had a really easy strength of schedule too, if I'm not mistaken, for their final 3 games. It was Immortals, TL, and TSM. So it's like, okay, IMT's a joke, and the other teams are supposed to be worse than you. And if you start dropping those games, even if you end above them in the standings and you beat Immortals but then lose to these teams or either one of them, I felt like, I don't know. The 3-0 finish solidified it for me. It wasn't just a flash in the pan. Really hot first round robin out of him is legitimately, I think, the best performing player in the league.
I think he's the best performing player in the league, and especially when you consider, you say with MVP you have to consider all the other things going on. When you consider the fact that he is their shot caller, that he is stepping up and being a leader in game, that he is fixing a lot of the problems, gameplay issues. If bot lane is making mistakes and whatnot, he's fixing those for them. He's taking the most pressure. He's on a team that really has no stars except him, and he's still performing the best. Like, I think when you combine all that, it's actually insane. And I'm really, like, I don't want to be hyperbolic, so I'll just pose it as a question. Do you, like, when is the last time you think like we had like this level of kind of, I don't know, like meteoric rise from an NA player?
Oh boy.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Bjergsen
Yeah.
Original Bjergsen, right?
Yeah.
Because the
Bjergsen definitely had it.
Because the rises of players, I don't feel like there's been another one that has had, like, the ascent has been that much. You think about, like, the other greats, right? Like Double Lift or something like that.
Way
Double Lift for
a
long, because he was on CLG for so long and didn't win. And so then, like, it makes it feel different because he was already.
Yeah, Jojo came in year 1, was already really good. Won Rookie of the Year, right? In his first year.
First split championship too.
Won championship. And now is I think he's going to win MVP in his 2nd year.
Yeah, I mean, like
bad split in spring though.
I think there's been other players who had like that flash in the pan. Like Tactical, for example. I know people are gonna meme this a little bit, but like he subbed in for Double Lift, did a really good regular season, had a good playoffs.
No,
I don't think it's close either. But
I was gonna let him finish, but
no.
All right.
He's nowhere close to being.
Well, you asked the question. Next time I just won't answer because there's not a good answer. Here we go. We're gonna move on ahead now.
So that is
no. We got 60 minutes. We got to do the job. We got to talk about playoffs. I don't care about MIP because I also don't remember who I voted anymore.
Most improved. I believe I did Licorice, Insanity, and I want to say I did Huhi for third. Licorice because it's over the course of the whole year for this one.
This and Rookie are both of the years.
Of the year. And I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, Licorice is really good at MSI. What are you talking about, little bro? But he was awful in spring. And I thought he was like, I remember talking about him on the dive as like, this guy is actually like, I'm a big Licorice fan, but like he's maybe the worst top in the league. He looked really bad in spring. So I do think his individual performance has been an incredible turnaround from talking about him in spring as the literal worst top laner in the league to I voted for him for first team All Pro and felt really good about it in summer. Insanity, I also think was pretty incredible. How much of a difference maker he has been for TSM, and the difference between now and the previous times he was in the LCS, I thought it was pretty night and day. And I think Huhi just on an individual level for the reasons I was talking about earlier.
Cool. Rookie of the year skipping.
Rookie of the year is pretty weak. I voted Yeon, but let's be honest, there's not that much of competition. I did Yeon and then Busio, and then I think I had APA third.
I was going to say, I'm just going to throw it, even though you only played very few games, I'll just throw APA, boom.
There's like a couple more people that were even qualifying, like Tenacity's not here anymore. I can't even remember who else it was, but it was not a very competitive cast, I don't think.
Nope. All right, so two teams dead in the water now, Immortals and FlyQuest, and Immortals really bumping up against the troubled waters. They have, technically, as far as people can remember, engaged now in a rule that is supposed to be in the franchising era, which is if you finish bottom two for 5 out of 8 splits, you are technically able to be reviewed by Riot and removed potentially from franchising. Yeah. It's never happened before. It probably won't happen here. And it's been a while since anyone's like confirmed that this rule is still in place. Who knows, exactly where the team participation agreement it is.
The rule was only even to make it possible.
Yeah, it's like you can be reviewed if you're really not trying.
Yeah, my understanding is Riot votes and all the teams have to vote. So like everyone has to kind of want you out.
It only makes it possible. The chance of that actually happening, I feel like is...
I think the chance of it happening is none, but I will say that they have had an awful run. This is from 2020. This is just regular seasons. From 2020 to now, 8th, 10th, 7th, 7th, 10th, 9th, 9th, 10th, right? So the peak was 7th, to be fair. In one of those playoffs, they finished 5th, 6th. But that is the only one. That was in summer 2021, I believe.
And that's winning a single best of 5 across 3 years now.
Yep. There's other budget teams.
Yeah, I mean, like, people crap on Dig. Say what you will. They've had a couple times where they finished top half of the league. They had a little splash in play-ins or block in that one time. They've had moments. For Immortals, they are a very sad story right now, and I don't know how they're going to turn it around because it becomes this like cyclical problem where like up and coming talent do not want to go to Immortals. I've heard people behind the scenes say this outright. I think you can even look at Kenvi as a case study of like maybe Kenvi wouldn't have worked out anywhere, but certainly wasn't going to work out on Immortals. And
I mean they've tried so many different players as well. Like I can't remember the exact stats, so I'm not going to just kind of pull it out of my butt. But like basically, they have been changing players more than almost any team, if not any team in the league. So they have been swapping rosters around constantly. They've been cycling through players constantly. None of it's working. So clearly, there are some serious issues, like on the organizational side. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like this level of performance is just terrible, right? Like they need to fix it. They need to make some changes because again, like there are teams that are budget rosters that are doing very, very well. CLG was working on a very small budget as well. From what I've heard, CLG was spending less than Immortals when they got 4th, right? It's like, so you can do it. Of course, you're not necessarily going to be winning the championship if you're on a budget roster, but they need to do better.
Yeah, it's depresso a little bit. I think Tactical, bright and shining star for me. Mm-hmm. You laugh, but I mean it, man.
I'm just remembering your cast.
Yeah.
But yes, I 100% agree. And it was made more clear even this final week. Like he completely stepped up again. So it's really nice to see, because Immortals is such a like dark and doomy place, right? For him to come back, and he's a very confidence-based player.
Yeah.
But for him to be playing, well on that edge, maybe back being paired with Treats again does help in that, like just feeling comfortable or whatever. But he looks so much better than he has in quite a while. So I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, definitely. And I hope get him a team.
Yep.
Yeah. That's what I've been saying. Gonna keep saying it. Get tactical team, whether it's on the Immortals or not.
FlyQuest, maybe a lot of people are talking about it, like biggest flop for a roster ever.
I think so.
I think so too.
They spent the most in the league.
The only comparable thing to me is 2020 spring Team Liquid, where Doublelift was just totally mentally checked out and they got 9th.
It's also like Vitality and stuff. Like there's
I was thinking LCS.
Even just here, yeah,
and LCS. I think that's the only other one, and that was not like. It was your star player not really trying, like getting complacent a little bit. He went to multiple international tournaments in a row, getting juiced up for spring. That's where this infamous spring doesn't matter thing came from in the first place, was like justifying it a little bit. And then immediately Doublelift bounces back and wins summer with TSM, and Team Liquid with Tactical become a top 3 team and go to Worlds. So like clearly it was just like this one-time underperformance. And like this was technically only one split, but it's hard
this was crazy.
It's hard to identify why. Like that Team Liquid story, you can point to the obvious why. And to be fair to Doublelift, like Broxa had, I think, visa issues and came in late, and Broxa was like not what he was billed as for the team. They were like
the only one playing bad.
Yeah, it's not all on Doublelift. The number of factors compounded, but like here, I don't even know where to start. It's like
everywhere except Impact.
Basically, yeah. Like Vikla lost all his confidence, started playing terrible. Spica disappeared from having early game impact.
Prince wasn't good. What the hell happened to Vulcan? He's been the best support in the LCS for, I think, a couple years, right? Like for like 3 or 4 years.
He stole the crown from CoreJJ and then immediately fumbled it. It feels like right when after getting it last year.
Vikla was the least surprising to me because I didn't think he was that good in spring. I was more negative on him than I think the community was because of all his kind of individual bad games. But like, I never expected the bot lane to be bad. Spica really struggled. It felt like as a team they never really gelled at all. They were apparently good in scrims the whole year long. So like, what the hell? Like this was crazy to me. The fact that they spent like more than ever, that they just like clear upgrades for the split, and then didn't
made
even
a
make
music
playoffs.
video at the beginning.
FlyQuest summer.
Losing is a bummer.
Showcase greatness.
Yeah.
Wait
a second. We're both showcasing.
You're both FlyQuest chills.
And the lights just went out on us.
It's the funeral time.
This was where the budget went,
We just tried to do some promo for FlyQuest and they turned the lights out on us.
Well, I'll say I'm sad for that reason as well, because they were still heavily invested in the league to like do poorly.
Yeah.
I think. It's like sad, and it's also sad that like who knows what the future of these players are. Knowing that they spent a lot and got this result, I think even if you had said like let's run this back because this isn't the level, we had good scrim results and like the players all want to stick together, budget wise I just don't think you can take this risk again at this payment in the current like landscape.
You didn't make top 8. It's the easiest playoffs ever.
Yeah, you can't run it back at this price point. So I think this roster is probably going to get exploded now, which is sad because like you want to see the potential of this team, but it's not there.
It's also just so weird because it's like, where do some of the players go, right? It's like Prince came over to NA and his stocks were like all-time high in LCK, and then has one really good split here, has an awful split, and then if you just kind of get booted off the roster, it's like, are you going to get a big offer in NA? Are you going to try to go back to LCK? Will anyone even want you there? Like it's weird, right? It's really weird to kind of come off a split like this if the team explodes, because people are going to have a lot of trouble, I think, evaluating what these players are worth.
I would for sure still pick up Prince. I would one bad split like this FlyQuest team is such a paradox. I feel like his future is fine.
I'm with you, but it always becomes like, if it's for LCS, what top team wants him, right? And that's always the struggle, is that it's like, does he want to actually go to like a bottom team? Probably not. But like C9's not going to want him. I don't think Golden Guardian's going to want him. You know what I mean? Like the teams that are the top teams that he would really immediately want to go to probably don't want him. And so I think that's where it becomes tough, where you have to like change your kind of like perspective on like what a team is willing to, what team you're willing to join. I think this has happened to a number of stars over the years, where it's like you're used to always just being on the best team, and then all of a sudden the best team doesn't want you, and you're like, wait, I have to go on this team?
Yeah, it can be a spiral for some players where they just don't get back on top. I would be sad if Prince left the ecosystem, but I understand if he did. Because it's probably you don't want to join. If your prospects aren't great in either region, you probably want to go back to your home region, I assume, for a number of reasons. But I really like Prince. Even on the last week when we were doing the
he's really fun.
What was the Soul Fighter day?
Yeah.
I was dressed up as Azael, and like he was in the makeup room at the same time, and he started like jokingly hitting on me and being like, "What's your number?" You know, and I was like, "I'll tell you after you win the match." And like this, like he's just a really fun person to be around, and so like, I'm gonna be sad if like he's not there anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. So the last day after they were already eliminated, not in playoffs, and they were about to play. Like I always go to the restroom. I saw him going in, and my default whenever I see any pros, I'm always like, good luck. And I said, good luck. And he stopped there and he looked at me and he was like, good luck. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, good luck. Have fun.
I mean, there's a lot of fun players on this team. I think Vikla on the real is going to be the person who has the hardest time landing on his feet because I think opinions are so negative about him. I mean, Impact has been good in this league forever. Someone's going to want him. You know, Spica, it's obviously sad because that guy's a content machine. You hope that he's going to land on his feet. Vulcan as well, quietly has like, kind of gone off socials because they're doing so bad, right? But like he was such a fun player to listen to and see the trash talk from for so long. So I hope these guys can bounce back.
Yeah. It'd be sad if they don't.
Playoffs.
All right, let's move on to these matchups because we are 70 minutes deep in this episode and we have to preview 2 playoff matches. First one is Team Liquid versus NRG. This is actually super hype. There were 1-1 in the regular season, 4 and 5.
The 2 most inconsistent teams squaring off.
These
TL
games
is not inconsistent. They're consistent.
These games have to be bangers though, because Team Liquid, so many times they get big early leads and the game gets crazy. Something happens late game, they lose.
They're holding so much money, they just can't handle it.
NRG, the opposite. You never know what you're going to get. Maybe they screw the early game super hard, but then they make a pick in the late game. They run through, they kill the Nexus. Oh my God, we're going to get some crazy endings to these games for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yes, technically they are consistent in the fact that they get early leads.
They're really good early and they're really bad late.
Yeah.
That did get better with APA being added. But then there was that one game where he took the super blast cone under the turret and then they threw. And I was like, whoa, is this the first step to a Team Liquid throw? And then it was, and they lost.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit concerned about APA in playoffs as well because he's pretty new and he has, kind of a different style of champion pool. So
Ziggs is the style.
I mean, it's Ziggs, but he's like, he also like his most played in solo queue is like Casio and stuff like this, right? So like he has his different picks. I wonder how that is going to work come playoff time because when people have different style of champion pools, sometimes they're going to get targeted pretty heavily in playoffs. And I think Palafox has been playing really, really well. So like I am confident that Palafox can be really good on all the meta picks. I'm less confident that APA can be. So I think the APA is going to have to make sure that he has a deep enough champion pool with like his comfort stuff to like if he's getting targeted, he still has good matchups to go to. Because if I'm NRG, I think that's immediately what I'm thinking about targeting and pick him in.
Plus, Palafox also does have weird stuff in his own back pocket too. So like I could see, with this is why playoffs is different. Is like you're prepping for 3 teams across the week during the regular season. You don't want to go too hard on strategy and one particular opponent. Here you're like, okay, give me a couple of Ziggs counter picks that we can prepare in game 1 if we want to open it, or maybe that's like our game 3 strat. If things aren't going good, we're going to early ban it in the series, and you have like multiple layers that you're going to try across a series. Whereas like you get the one shot in the regular season, and you're like, oh damn, that game's over. All right, on to the next one. So the APA versus Palafox, I think, will be a pretty big linchpin for strategically what's going to happen in this series.
Also, minor note, so C9 finished first. They got to decide if they were on the side of the bracket with EG or TSM, or if they're on the side of the bracket with TL or NRG. They chose to be on the side with EG and TSM. So they chose to not be on the side with TL and NRG. So they obviously think that's the harder side of the bracket.
Yeah, I think the only thing you do need to ban against APA is the Ziggs. I actually don't care about any of the other, comfort picks or the Casio or anything like that. The Ziggs is a problem, though. Ziggs is extremely good. That's the only permaban you need. So I feel like it doesn't even hurt you that much to target ban, because usually when you think, oh, they've got a player that you can just target ban, then you're going to have to sacrifice other things like, oh, Kindred for Pioshik or something like that. But I really feel actually the only thing evaluating it is like the Ziggs really brings it all together.
Yeah. So Ziggs probably going to get knocked off the table.
It's just to give you his top 3 most played in solo queue: Casio, Kled, then Pantheon, right? So like this guy has a bit of a wacky champion pool, and then it goes Tristan, Ziggs.
Yep. So
and the only one I care about is the Ziggs out of those.
Yeah, and if he plays Trist, Palafox will play Silas or something and has his answer. So I think that's a big matchup. I think the rest of the board, the best thing for TL is maybe topside, depending on what kind of Dokla shows up. Dokla did have a much better final week of the regular season, and he can have his own carries that we've seen him pop out on Aurelia and Yone,
but not since spring.
It's been a while.
Yeah, like I said, he had one of the games this week. He had a good performance. I can't remember quite which one it was, but I think Summit is just the king of top lane right now in lane phase, and he slams people harder than anyone else.
And I think Dokla also had the worst laning phase in the league in top lane as far as CSD. Let me double check.
I'm pretty sure it was Solo or
maybe I'm misremembering.
Solo definitely had it rough.
Yeah,
no Dokla. So Solo is negative 5.3 CS. Haunter is negative 6.2. Those are usually the guys people say are 9-10. Dokla negative 8.7 CSD at 10, and then Summit is positive 12.4. So these are people polar opposites in the league right now. Maybe it's a little bit different at 14. I'm just looking at 10 stats right now.
Yeah.
But I remember looking at this and being like, wow, he was actually the worst in the league. As far as like gold differential at 10, he's second worst in the league. By like all metrics, he is just awful at laning right now. So, like, I think this is actually a crazy mismatch. You're talking about maybe the worst laning top laner in the league versus far and away the best laning top laner in the league. This could be, if Dokla doesn't have a really good series, this could be an absolute just top canyon.
Could be. For some reason, I have that feeling that it won't. Just because we have more familiarity with Dokla's game. It's not like, oh my god, yeah, he's gonna be this black hole to soak to Summit.
But that's how I felt the whole split. But I'm like, man, the whole split ended, and he never got back to the guy that I thought he was. I think it's like, so now I'm at the point where I'm like, you have to prove to me that you're that guy again.
Well, so a couple things for the Dokla lane phase thing. He hasn't died as much in lane as like a Solo and Haunter, who have like multiple first blood deaths, as well as way more during the lane phase, way more ISO deaths. So while
I think he's better than Solo and Haunter.
Yeah, but I also think he's not like getting giga gapped in terms of getting solo killed and stuff. Like, he actually doesn't have a ton of ISO deaths. He's not making like the back-breaking mistakes, which is one of the things that happens to Summit in playoffs and has happened even on like the great C9 roster, is like, okay, you're winning by 15 CS with like a pretty lane-centric matchup, and now you're going to team fights up 500 gold, but you're also getting into, like, he still makes these mistakes. Like, this can happen. And so like, I think, yeah, it's obviously going to be Summit favored in lane phase, but if he's not making the back-breaking plays, I think it will come down to like long game time, because this, like we said, this is the Team Liquid problem. If they don't blow people out by 10K at 15 minutes, they lose a lot of games.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I agree, like, it'll be an early lead, but the more interesting part about this matchup is how the teams play through mid game.
I mean, because Energy has similar problems too with the FBI, where like FBI, I think his highs are high, and he manages to get himself in a good positions, fairly often. But I do feel like I don't have that much confidence that he'll, like, if he has a lead, there's certain players who are like, okay, they won the game. FBI is not one of those. He's had a lot of moments where he is really far ahead and makes a bad play and dies, and then all of a sudden the game kind of flips on its head, right? So I think both these teams have some of those struggles. If you want to put on like the Energy favorite hat, it's definitely that Energy has played kind of like up to the level of their competition, right? Like, they play really well against top teams. Against top 5, I don't know what the actual season ending record was, but I know at one point it was tweeted out they were like 6-2 versus top 5, and then they were like horrible record versus bottom.
I think it only got better because then they beat C9 again. So
it's like versus playoff teams, Energy has a really good record. So like maybe they really will just like rise to the occasion and play incredible in playoffs. And I think if that's the Energy that comes out, I think Energy at their best, I think will beat TL, because TL has never really shown to me that they can fix their mid and late game problems. But it's hard to know for sure what Energy is going to kind of come to the table.
Yeah, I feel like you're going to look like an idiot either way with the prediction in this, because it's like you predict Team Liquid and it's like they troll a bunch of late games, they end up losing the series. How could you believe in this team? They've never shown that they can like keep it together over a stretch of time. So of course they're not going to win best of 5. You predict NRG, Team Liquid just steamrolls them in the early game. It's like, how could you not predict this team? They're so much better in the early game. So I feel like this is one of the series where I really have no idea what's going to happen, because the variance for both teams is so high. I kind of lean NRG just because we've seen them challenge C9 in playoffs before with this group of guys. I have a little bit more confidence in them. I'm a little scared about the APA situation.
I'm more scared that the APA situation results in a loss than I am about Dokla getting gaps resulting in a loss.
Yeah.
I think that top is going to be a huge gap.
Yeah.
I think that Summit's going to smack him, but I do agree with what you guys are saying in that like Dokla losing lane every game to Summit doesn't necessarily equate to a loss. Whereas I think if Palafox is running over mid lane, like if they can create advantages there,
that affects Pioshik,
exactly.
that can affect bot lane.
Spreads out to the rest of the map.
Speaking of the junglers, these are two crazy ass junglers.
Speaking of the jungle, these are some crazy ass motherfuckers.
This is actually two really they've been playing psychopath junglers here. Both Pioshik and Contracts have huge variance here. And I'm very high on Pioshik right now, but like going up in a best of series versus Contracts versus NRG, like this could easily, like you're saying, you know, oh, how could you not predict it to go this way? I could easily see jungle being like, oh my god, massive jungle gap one way, and then next game it's actually massive jungle gap the other way.
It's just so funny though, because if you talk about individual lanes and stuff, like TL's early game is just so good that you just start thinking about, if you go about lane by lane, you're like, of course TL are going to win. They're going to slam top lane. Their 2v2 buys way better. AP's been playing great. And, you know, like, Pioshik's early game has been so good. Like, of course they're going to slam them, right? But then it's like, you really have to temper that when you realize that it's like, yeah, they always do that, but then they always have these other issues. So I do find it, like, to be a really hard to predict series. I agree that, like, any prediction, you could come out looking like an absolute buffoon, because TL could just have that early game and then not make the mid-game mistakes, and they could crush NRG.
Summit doesn't get picked off in the late game.
That could happen.
24 isolated deaths in the regular season, number one of all players.
The best was the Dokla casting the Team Liquid game, and when Summit died, he's like, "Oh, I've never seen this before," and now they're playing against each other. I
mean, there are players that people's entire strategy around that player when they start losing becomes go kill this guy because he's going to give you some freebies, right?
Yeah.
And Summit is one of those guys, but at the same time, plus 2,241 gold is Teal's average at 15, which is absolutely absurd. And to compare that to NRG is negative 463, which is more like average-ish or a little bit below average for the early game.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see it. Team Liquid early favor, and then NRG have had really strong mental. Like I say, a lot of these games stick out in my head, maybe, that they're comebacks. So maybe it's not like such an impressive thing, but there have been a decent amount of games where NRG is losing, and they still win the game. There was one of them I casted. The gold graph had 1 pixel where they had a gold lead.
That's all they need.
And then they won the game because they even when they're down,
when they're down, they're up.
Maybe it comes from being non-rational gamers and
non-rational gaming, baby.
So many. Let me finish.
Sorry.
What was I even gonna say? I don't even remember now.
You said they're always down. Maybe it comes from being
they have really strong mental. They've found picks that can still win them games when they're down like 3-4K or whatever. Basically, is
I'm gonna go NRG.
Just to the point.
You sold me on NRG. It was where you're going with that. Yeah, like they'll win any game, and I think
also lose any game against bad teams.
Yeah, but
TL's too good.
TL's not a bad team. Yep, exactly. Non-rational.
Yeah, TL is far too good. That's where they made their mistakes.
I'll go.
If this was Immortals against them, 3-0 Immortals.
I'll go 3-2 NRG. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling too. But I honestly, that's just me saying, I don't really know. This one could go either way. I don't know that it's actually going to be a 5-game series. I hope we get a 5-game banger. I wouldn't be shocked if either team 3-0'd each other.
I understand.
All right. TSM versus EG, 3 versus 5. I think
6.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, you're right. They're both listed at 5 here. I just read the thing. I didn't use my brain. So I felt like this a couple of weeks ago. I would have felt a lot more positive for TSM, but I think TSM has been on a pretty big downward trend. I think that EG, after their 3-0 with Shaden, I think are looking pretty hot. One of my biggest concerns for TSM is top lane. Absolutely. I think Hansar has really been struggling. He was on his 6-game streak of Renekton where they're looking pretty good. Ever since then, Renekton is first round banned against them every single game. Every team is doing this. Every team has recognized this as a huge weakness. And I've heard this from multiple top laners that they think that like Hansar on Renekton and Hansar off Renekton is like a massive gap in performance. And so unless he can really step up on something else, I think that is a huge issue because I think Revenge is playing well. I think, even though Insanity had a great split, I really do favor them heavily in mid. It's the guy I voted for MVP. I have to. I think the EG has a lot of edges across the board. I think TSM's bot lane is definitely really good, but it's like I favor them in most roles. I favor EG in probably 4 out of 5 roles. I favor Boogie probably, maybe over Shaden, but I think Boogie had a pretty darn good
Support's
split.
Pretty close too.
Support is also very close. But at the end of the day, it's like I really think that EG are pretty heavily favored here.
So this was the last game of the split for both of these teams. It was 2-0 for both of them during the regular season for EG. The second one was with Shaden. So they did one with Armeo, one with Shaden. Both were victories for EG. And Jojo... the last one is the one that I actually remember because that was the most recent one, but that was the Jojo Tristana again, and absolute perma push, absolute massive pressure there. Unforgiven also had a good game on the Kaisa, so and they also already used the Ivern. Like, it does feel like Evil Geniuses have a lot of advantages coming in here, but to me, the most worrying thing for TSM is actually not even from the games. It was from the interview that Revan did with Degon, where he was concerned about the players' focus. And that was recent, only like a week or 2 weeks ago, heading into the last week of LCS, and then that can transition into playoffs. So in the interview, Revan says, we're going to have a really big meeting tonight, and I'll let you know how it goes, whether we win or lose. Then you'll know how the meeting went, getting everybody on the same page and getting everybody focused for playoffs. And then after that, they lost to EG. So it does not bode super well. I am very curious as to what that meeting actually entailed, and what conclusions they came to as far as the direction for the gameplay for this team.
Yeah, well, because it's a 4-game loss streak now for them, including a loss to a FlyQuest, who obviously was not super impressive. C9 and EG, fair enough, but then they lost 100 Thieves before that. So it's a team that to this point doesn't feel like it's heading into the postseason with a lot of momentum. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? And then, like you were saying, Azael, strategically, it does feel like a tough matchup. I think Golden Guardians and EG are the worst matchups for TSM because it feels like so much has to do with Insanity, getting push and doing things. And now you're against mid laners who are just really good in those two teams that can really shut down Insanity. So, yeah, I don't see how they win this series across 5 games. I think they can win a game or 2, but Jojo's going to basically be winning mid lane for most of the series. Your bot lane is probably the biggest mismatch for TSM in their favor. But they're not like turbo lane dominant where they smurf you. It's more like they break Chime out, who starts roaming around with Boogie and makes some good plays.
So I can see the way, if it does happen for TSM to win, I can see the way for them to win, but it's not to put Hanser on Kennen like this. It's to put him back on
on Gwen,
back on Malphite or Ornn and team fight. Your bottom lane is going to be your most reliable lane. Since mid lane's going against Jojo, while Insanity's been good, I feel like that's going to be hard to rely on for team fights. I think the way that TSM does win is maybe not win early game, but win the team fights, build for team fights, have Hanser on front line. Boogie's been pretty good at facilitating. You can have double front line, Hanser and Boogie, and then rely on bottom lane carrying team fights and try and send some amount of resources mid so that mid is not completely, Jojo doesn't get freedom to rule the map, basically. You have to at least put him under control and give Insanity something to work with. But that would be the way that I would see the win.
I think it's hard, right? Because it's like everyone feels like Jojo's playing so well that you have to focus him. But then to me, EG's plan becomes very easy. If your mid laner is winning the 1v1, you just have to play for the 2v2 and the 3v3, right? And just protect this guy and start warding around him. And that's one of the things that built confidence. Not just that EG won the last week, but that they actually started to understand how they have to play around Jojo to enable him. They're putting more vision behind him. They're actually roaming and matching the roam timers from the enemy, because it's like that is a clear way to beat EG. Is if you can put Jojo in the dirt, then all of a sudden the map falls apart. I do think there's possibilities that TSM could win this. Maybe Boogie could get a big advantage over Shaden. We don't know how Shaden's going to be playing, right? It's like obviously a lot of pressure, I think, going into this playoff series. You only played with the team for 1 week. They did have a really good week, but if Boogie has a really good performance, if they can win around mid lane 2v2 and that sort of stuff, then I think that can spread into the rest of the map. I do have concerns that if they play really slow and there's like, okay, we're gonna pick Ornn and we're gonna go for a 5v5, we're gonna play Jinx every game. Like, I don't know that they're really gonna reliably outperform EG in 5v5s either, because I do think when I think of Unforgiven, even though I didn't put him as my third team All Pro, I think that's kind of like his bread and butter, is if you allow them to just like get to that stage where he's going to play well in 5v5, like he is so consistent in that stage. And if Haunter is always taking the losing matchup against Revenge, then it's like I could very easily see losing control of the top side of the map pretty quickly, right? It's like if we're just going to blind pick tanks and you're playing into Gwens and things like this and losing push, then you're probably going to be losing Heralds. If Jojo's winning, then you're losing top side of your jungle, and like can really start to snowball. So I'm definitely concerned for TSM, like what their game plan is going to be, but it feels like no matter who it is playing against EG, you have to have a real plan for Jojo, and you have to have some way to answer him. So maybe it's a clever pick from Insanity. Maybe it is just playing heavy, drafting heavy for 2v2 between Boogie and Insanity, and counting on the fact that you can win out there. But I think if Jojo is kind of given freedom, I think EG's going to roll him.
Even then, like, it's a 5-game series. You can't just do that once where you have a clever pick. It's like, okay, they're going to adapt now. What are you going to do for the next 2 games, assuming that they actually answer this somehow? So that's why, for me, I really don't think mid-jungle is actually a way to consistently win against them, unless Shaden just, like, shits the bed somehow, and they don't support Jojo at all, and they're just never playing around him. I think it has to come through bot lane, because I do think, legitimately, if, like, Chime and Turtle play hella aggro and are just, like, burger flipping games all the time, like, that's, like, yeah, just fight to the death. Let's go. Like, maybe that's actually the best way, because I haven't been very impressed with Ayla and Unforgiven's decision making under pressure too. Especially, it's like the FlyQuest loss sticks in my mind, where they just like jump on the other guy because like Armeo's kind of around, but like, what are you doing? Because they just took jungle and you had no sums. Like, it's such an obvious don't go for that play. Just the sums thing alone is like, you shouldn't take this, and they did. So they have some very questionable decision making, and like maybe you can pressure them there.
My biggest concern is always just that it's like, Jojo has just shown that he just rolls every mid, feels like 1v1 if you allow him to do it. So it's like, not that is the easiest way or the most consistent is to play 2v2, but I just feel like if you don't, Jojo's probably going to win mid and then he's going to go bot, right? Like, that is the problem. And I think that is the difficulty of dealing with this team, is that the Jojo problem is not an easy one to solve. So, I'm pretty EG favored in this one, but I hope that, TSM really can make a good series of it and, and show us something surprising.
Yeah, I think they have already surprised so many times that I'm going with, all right, I'm keeping the fire alive. It'll be interesting.
Do you believe in a TSM win then?
I mean, do you believe that there's a possibility? Yeah.
No. Like, what's your prediction? What's your prediction?
I mean, nobody's gonna predict this is the most massive underdog, right? This is the biggest difference. It's rank 3 versus rank 6, right? So like, predicting TSM to be the higher chance of winning is kind of trolling. To say that there isn't a possibility of winning, though, I think is also trolling. Like, they are the underdogs, but there's a legitimate chance. I mean, Turtle has been super consistent. That's why I went with like the team fighting idea, and I feel like Chime has also been sneakily like one of the best supports. Really, so.
You know what? I was going to go 3-1, but since you said it'd be trolling to say there's no chance, I'm going to say 3-0 EG. I will troll, actually. Don't mind if I do. 3-0 EG.
Okay, I'm 3-1 EG. I think it should be a good series, though. I'm really excited. Playoffs, remember, it's not on Wednesday. No Wednesdays in playoffs. This is going to be Thursday and Friday. So Thursday is EG TSM. Friday is TL versus NRG. Should be a lot of fun. That is going to do it for this episode of The Dive. It was a doozy, 95 minutes, maybe all 100 even at this point. But remember, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of The Dive. You can also check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Anchor.fm. Keep sending us your questions. If you want us to answer some playoff questions and stuff going into next week, hit us up on Twitter, #TheDiveLOL. I already said it. LCS Summer Playoffs kicks off this Thursday on July 27th. It's EG versus TSM at 2 p.m. PST. We'll see you there.